Many hot and humid summer day was spent in my basement, the only cool place available. A group of girls gathered around a world of places like Oriental Avenue or St. Charles Place. How many Monopoly players do we have out there? Accumulating all four railroads, winning the pile of free parking money, or passing go and collecting $200. 3 turns in jail was sometimes a luxury if it meant avoiding the vast row of hotels erected on the upper crust side of the board. Destinations like Marvin Gardens or the infamous Boardwalk. It was all great fun, but at the same time, there was also a lot of seriousness about the outcome. Who could accumulate the most property, build the most houses, erect the most hotels? And the real question was, which one of us could stand firm and demand full payment from the one who landed there by an unlucky roll of the dice, even if it meant mortgaging or handing over their own properties in the process? Planning, brokering, threatening, even praying were part of the rules of engagement. If after several pleas grace were given, would it be returned on the next roll of the dice? Friendships were frequently cemented, broken, and reluctantly reinstated, all in the space of a summer afternoon. The one with the biggest pile of money would smile contentedly. The one closest to bankruptcy would cringe at every shake of the dice. And then Mom would call for dinner, and all the money and all the property were put back in the box, and the game was over. Now I am more mature, and I smile at the memories of those games. How serious we girls took those games, and of course, how seriously we took ourselves. This popular game, over 275 million games sold, is a game that you win by driving your opponents into bankruptcy. And it is so much fun to win and to accumulate the most stuff, the great American pastime. One of the things I used to do when I had more time was to go to estate sales or auctions. I had a friend who was always interested in finding odd collectibles. It was kind of a passion with her. And so the best sales were always the ones in the old farmhouses, places that had attics and pole barns and garages and outbuildings crammed with stuff. And there it would be, Aunt Susie's collection of ceramic dolls, Bob's Elvis records, Fred's Life magazines, yard tools, and underused appliances of every description. But there was always something a little sad about seeing someone's life, their treasures, the things they had accumulated so earnestly over a lifetime, displayed so casually among the dandelions and the plastic lawn furniture. Which brings us to Jesus' story about a man, a rich man apparently, a landowner, who had an uncommonly good year. What a story. Every 3 years, I wonder what the lectionary designers were thinking. Unsuspecting people coming to church on a summer Sunday, getting hit with this gospel message. One of Mark Twain's best-known quotations is, "It's not the parts of the Bible that I can't understand that bother me. It's the parts that I do understand." Well, this parable is called The Rich Fool, and it is found only in the Gospel of Luke. It begins with a man bringing a legal question, a man asking Jesus to tell his brother to divide an inheritance with him. Rabbis had not only religious, but juridical authority, and according to Judaic inheritance practices, an older brother would receive 2/3 of an estate, while the younger would receive only 1/3. And this brother, presumably the younger, less powerful brother, needed outside arbitration. Well, Jesus' reply has a sarcastic tone. Man, who made me a judge or divider over you? Maybe Jesus just wasn't interested in helping a man asking for a rubber stamp on his own interests. In fact, in response, Jesus tells the story about the rich man's fields that produced more than his barns could hold. Now, we might explain verses 18 and 19 as a decision to take early retirement by a man who had accumulated more than he could expect to spend in a lifetime. At first glance, we see him as the hero, the American dream, right? Hard work, good planning, and a little luck, stock options, 401ks, and the American entrepreneur passes go and collects $200 and keeps on collecting. Now, we can all agree that good stewardship means taking care of what you have, using it to the best of our abilities. I mean, didn't Joseph help Pharaoh take the good years, the bumper crops of 7 years, and store them for the 7 famine years, thereby saving the Egyptians as well as his own family? And what about those Israelites wandering in the wilderness, gathering twice as much manna before the Sabbath day of rest? Wouldn't the rich man have been more of a fool not to plan for his future? And I have to confess my own exertions with money and the time I have spent talking to tax advisors, looking at the clergy pension plan and calculating the contribution to the retirement savings plan. And I'm not alone. The clergy blogs were buzzing this week because this text hits very close to home. But first, let's put ourselves as Jesus' audience for this parable. The scourge of the ancient world was drought. Therefore, bumper crops were viewed as gifts of God, providing for the future when lean years would surely arrive. So planning to bigger barns was a good idea. And like Joseph in Egypt, Jesus' hearers would expect the rich man will prepare for the drought years to help feed his neighbors, especially the poor ones. Yet there is nothing in the rich farmer's thoughts about that. The language is all I and me, my barns, my grain, my goods. The rich farmer had other plans. He was looking out only for himself. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones. I will store all my grain and my goods, and I'll say, take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But in this story, God has a speaking part. Fool, tonight yourself will be demanded from you, and who will get the stuff you've piled up? The man may be a God-fearing man, but he is also a practical atheist, ignoring both God's law and his neighbor's need. But then comes the real question, whose will it be? Who will get the stuff you've piled up? Well, Jesus' Jewish audience would know the answer, that ultimately the goods will be distributed to the hungry according to God's purposes. So I ask you, what was the rich man's folly? Both the lure of money when one has little and the misuse of wealth that one already possesses can damage one's soul. No wonder Jesus talks so much about a person's relationship with money. 16 of his 38 parables are concerned with how to handle wealth and possessions. 1 out of 10 verses in the Gospels, 288 in all, deal directly with the subject of earthly treasure. And overall, the Bible offers more than 2,000 verses on money, 4 times as much as verses on prayer or faith. Why? Because the idolatry of money and possessions has the capacity to usurp the primacy of God in one's life and become a huge stumbling block to our spiritual growth. A story is told of a tourist from America who paid a visit to a renowned Polish rabbi. He was astonished to see that the rabbi's house was only a simple room filled with books and had in it only a table and a bench. "Rabbi," asked the tourist, "where is your furniture?" "Where is yours?" asked the rabbi in return. "Mine?" questioned the American. "But I am only passing through." "So," said the rabbi, "am I." In our story, the rich fool stockpiled the bounty of his land and dies before he can enjoy it. A sad story. So what do we choose to hoard and not release? Possessions, surely. Look at the rows and rows of storage facilities being built, all to accommodate people's overflowing stuff. Wealth, certainly. And what about time? Each of us, rich or poor, is given 168 hours per week. How do we spend it? How do we share it? How much of our time with our spouse or child or friend or community is held back, hoarded for a someday that may never come? Or what about talent or ability, affection, love? All can be stockpiled and not used, hoarded and not shared. Grain locked up in storehouses cannot feed hungry people, nor can their remains decay and replenish the land. Affection felt but not shared cannot nourish the spirit of others. Resources saved in overabundance cannot feed hungry children. But imagine if those others were on the receiving end of love, how they might then find that place in themselves from which to love. So what was the rich man's folly? It was not in the having. We know that money can do lots of wonderful things, provide security for your family, and given to those in need can create jobs and promote the general welfare. It just can't produce the kind of full and abundant life that each of us seeks and that Jesus promised. The rich man's folly was in the keeping to himself, for himself, not needing or wanting anyone else, not even God. My friends, we are people of privilege. Bounty, wealth, talent, time, affection, love, we have it. Each of us has something to share. This story of Jesus reminds us, invites us to consider the important things, the things of the kingdom, relationships, community, and a life of purpose. These are the things of God's abundant life. And so, my friends, let us be good stewards. Be rich, Luke says. Be rich toward God. And don't wait until the game is over and God calls us to dinner. I would like to end today with words from the Sarum Prayer, a 16th century or earlier English prayer. Sometimes we sing it, that talks about our connection with God. God be in my head and in my understanding. God be in my eyes and in my looking. God be in my mouth and in my speaking. God be in my heart and in my thinking. God be at my end and at my departing. Amen.